Thanks, Bob. Happy to be here.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Alex.
Charles Lutwidge Dodgson was born on January 27, 1832. He was an inspiration to many because of his famous work, Alice in Wonderland. There are many varying opinions about him and his writing. Was he on drugs? Was there an actual reasoning behind his nonsense? Was it indeed nonsense? Within the next 10 minutes, we are going to unveil the truth about Charles's life, philosophies, connections throughout the book, and his extreme love for math and little girls. Charles's family was predominantly from northern England. They were all conservative, Anglican, high church, upper middle class, and mostly went to go on to the profession of being in the army or the church. Along the line of many Charleses, his great-grandfather was a bishop. His grandfather was an army captain. One of Charles's babies was yet another Charles, who was our Charles's, Lewis Carroll's, father. Lewis's father was extremely talented in math and went to Oxford University. He married his cousin, retired in the country, and had 11 children, one of them being Lewis. Next, we'll have an interview with the man himself.
Hi, I'm Bobby Lanzlotta, here with Charles Dodgson, better known as Lewis Carroll, author of Alice in Wonderland. So, Lewis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on your show, Bob.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Well, I was born in Cheshire, England in 1832, and I was the oldest boy of 11 children.
That's a big family. What was it like
is.
having so many kids running around?
Well, it was pretty hectic, and I had to take care of all the girls around the house, so I had to make up games to keep them company and use my imagination, so that was very fun to do. I also enjoyed magic, so I put on magic shows for my family. I also enjoyed poetry and writing.
Oh, and rumor has it that you're deaf in one ear.
Wait, what? But first, let me just tell you, I'm also deaf in one ear, so you might have to talk a little louder.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So rumor has it you're deaf in one ear.
Oh, yeah, I am. I am.
Okay.
And at the age of 17, I had a whooping cough, and I also now have a stutter, so my childhood was not the healthiest.
So, now let's talk about your schooling, shall we?
We shall. I just love math. I've been gifted, but I'm not very motivated. I was sent to boarding school at the age of 12, and after that I attended rugby school.
So, what about college?
I went to Christ Church College within Oxford University, where my father also happened to go, and then I graduated in 1854.
And what did you do after college?
After college, I went to teach at that very university, and I'm still teaching there currently.
Interesting. Very long time.
Very long.
Switch. Charles went on to teach at the Christ Church College in Oxford and won the Christ Church Mathematical Lectureship, which he then held for 26 years. However, he was very lazy, his students didn't want to learn, and he did not want to teach. That's when he went on to photography. He adopted this hobby in 1856, and it soon consumed his life. Photography was his means of expressing his personal inner philosophy about beauty. This was a belief in the divinity of what he called beauty, by which he seemed to mean a state of moral or aesthetic or physical perfection. He found beauty in many things: theater, math, photography, and poetry. He sought his own representations by combining the ideals of freedom and beauty into the innocence of what he called Eden, where the human body and human contact could be enjoyed without shame. Later, he reformed his philosophy by using beauty to retrieve lost innocence.
As he continued photography, he became best known for his pictures of young girls. The parents were always in attendance while the photos were being taken, and they were usually taken in the Littles' garden. About 30 of his pictures were of naked young girls. Later, he established a studio and created around 3,000 images. However, less than 1,000 survived because of the time, and others were deliberately destroyed.
As you could probably tell, Carroll had an obsession with little girls. Also, because he was so comfortable around children, he did not stammer as much compared to when he was around adults. Anyway, he was always focused on prepubescent girls, and once they did hit puberty, he lost interest. He always looked at them for friendships, and often felt lonely and rejected when they grew up. In the real world, he was seen as a pedophile. However, in the business world, he was seen as wanting the company of female children. Girls were always his inspiration for his creative energies during his isolated life. This is the reason why he always photographed little girls and wrote about them. One of the girls was Alice. Continuing with his career, Carroll was best known for his writings. Lewis was always writing, he never stopped. He even had diaries that he would constantly write in. When he was younger, he would always write plays and puppet shows to put on for his family and friends. While he was teaching at Christ Church, he wrote many comedies and parodies in a humorous paper called The Train. Carroll went under several different names at first, but finally decided on Lewis Carroll, which was a mix of letters from his full name, Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. In 1865, Alice in Wonderland was published under that name. Then, in 1871, he wrote the sequel Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. After he wrote Alice, Lewis Carroll took on another life from Charles Dodgson. He had 2 different personalities. Later on, Lewis quit teaching at Christ Church in 1881. After he wrote Alice, it is said that he did not like his fame and wished he never wrote the book, even though it got him his fortune. On January 14, 1898, Carroll died of pneumonia and influenza at the age of 65. Throughout his writings, specifically Alice, there were many mirrors from his actual life that he snuck into his books.
Alright, Lewis, thanks again so much for coming out tonight.
Oh, happy to be here, Bob.
Oh, and Lewis, by the way, there's been some rumors going around that you might have been under the influence of drugs when you were making your work.
Well,
Because all of his writings were so creatively crazy, there are many theories regarding whether or not Carroll was under the influence of drugs when writing Alice in Wonderland. There is no clear evidence stating he was or was not. However, there is plenty of evidence suggesting the strong possibility he was. During the Victorian era, the time Carroll wrote Alice, opium was widespread throughout England. In fact, 5 out of 6 families used opium habitually. Also, there are many scenarios in Alice that were at least inspired by drug use. Some scenes include Alice shrinking and growing, which is often compared to mind-altering drugs. The caterpillar smoking a hookah is often used for smoking opium, and Alice eating mushrooms, which represent psychedelic mushrooms. So although it was not proven nor disproven that Carroll was under the influence, it is evident they did play some role.
Alright, Lewis, now let's talk about Alice. What was your inspiration for Alice in Wonderland?
Funny you should ask, Bob. I became close friends with the Littles through their father, who was actually the Dean of Oxford, and I befriended his daughter, Alice, who was 10 years old at the time.
So she was the one who inspired the character Alice?
Yes, she actually was, and I first told her the story one day on a picnic, and after I told her, she asked if I could write the story for her.
So how did the story get published then?
Sorry, what? I'm actually deaf in one ear, I can't really hear you.
How did the story get published?
Oh, okay. It was actually by chance. A novelist, Henry Kingsley, got a copy of the story, and he loved it, and urged me to publish it.
After publishing the book under the name Lewis Carroll, and it gained a lot of popularity, what'd you do afterwards?
I wrote the sequel, Through the Looking Glass, in What Alice Found There, in 1871.
Lewis Carroll's life seems to have had a major impact on this book. Many of the characters were inspired by his own experiences and struggles. Even the plot as a whole references his life in a discreet manner. For instance, the Dodo character has a stammer that impedes his speech, and Carroll had a stammer himself. It is likely that he channeled the stammer through the character. Carroll's life seems to have also played a role in the size of distortion.
So, Lewis, how do you think your life influenced your book?
Well, Bob, first of all, this is actually kind of embarrassing for me to say, but the one character, Dodo, I characterized after myself. See, I have a hard time saying my last name, the Dodgson, so I decided to put my stutter to good use and use it as a character.
Oh, wow, interesting. Now, can you tell us a little bit about why you had Alice changing sizes all the time?
Oh yeah, of course. I've always had this bad disorienting migraines. On top of that, I have this medical condition called aura that causes me to have distorted perception. So sometimes I see objects randomly shifting sizes drastically.
Oh.
This aura was called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. His childhood seems to echo throughout the text. The largest example of this would be the neglect he experienced coming from such a large family, manifesting itself in the form of his protagonist going entirely unnoticed as a child alone in a strange world. This can be seen when she is at tea and walks away hoping the Hatter or the Mouse would call her back, but neither do, making her feel neglected. He was raised in an extremely conservative household with a proud military history, which may have contributed to the structure and hierarchy in Wonderland. He also had an aversion to food as a child, and it seems that this made its way into Wonderland in the form of things labeled, "drink me and eat me," as if it was a command. He always needed to overcome his eating issues. It is evident that Carroll had an obsession with time and age. He seemed to think of it as a hindering obstacle in life that he wanted to escape. The White Rabbit is preoccupied with time as well, but rather he lives by it. In contrast to Lewis Carroll facing a vast majority of people who embrace time in the real world, the rabbit is the only one keeping track of time in Wonderland. Carroll was a fan of croquet, which appears in the novel when Alice and the other characters play it with the Queen. He was a chess enthusiast, and this was incorporated into the sequel through the Looking Glass. Using his knowledge in mathematics, he loved to invent puzzles and games. In his work, the characters love to answer questions indirectly with what first seems like nonsense, but can then be deciphered much like a puzzle. The Mad Hatter even stumps Alice with a riddle. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Although a riddle is not necessarily a math-related puzzle in the sense of those Carroll developed, they still require the same analytical thinking. The caterpillar was symbolic for the system of algebra, which was by Augustus de Morgan in the 19th century. This idea was that any procedure was valid as long as it followed an internal logic. Out of this idea came square roots and negative numbers. The word algebra comes from an Arabic phrase meaning restoration and reduction. De Morgan explained that even though algebra reduced to a seemingly absurd but logical set of operations, eventually some sort of meaning would be restored. This happens to Alice literally when she tries to restore herself to her normal size, but then she ends up reducing her size drastically. Caterpillar references temper when he says, "keep your temper," which can mean a ratio of quantities, in her case, her size. Her overall size doesn't matter as long as everything is in the right proportion. The same goes for the Euclidean geometry Carroll admired. A logical nature of the story represents Carroll's that emerging math principles were illogical. Projective geometry was mocked by the baby changing into a pig. It still follows the principle of continuity, the idea that one shape can bend and stretch into another. The Mad Hatter and the March Hare are symbols for the great math of William Rowan Hamilton. Hamilton said that the manipulation of numbers should be thought of as steps. He called this pure time. This had to do with sequence rather than actual time. The Mad Tea Party should really be read as the Mad Tea, as in the letter T, party. T representing time. Quaternions, a means of measuring rotation using algebra that was discovered around the time of Alice's publication. The Mad Hatter's Tea Party represents this concept. The researcher who came up with the theory of quaternions realized that it would take 4 dimensions to calculate rotation, but he could not prove the 4th dimension was time. Carroll parodied this by using the 3 characters at T who are constantly rotating around the table to represent the 3 quantifiable dimensions. The Hatter reveals that he has lost track of time and that they are stuck in an infinite T time without it. Just as time was missing as a dimension in rotation, it was missing at T. Without time, the other 3 dimensions could not be deciphered, and rotation was a mystery. Lastly, the Queen of Hearts is seen as an irrational number because of her wanting to chop everyone's heads off if they do the slightest thing wrong. Also, there is a pun on axis, which is the plural version of an axis on the graph.
It's Lewis Carroll, author of... Oh, I didn't see you there. That was a bad idea.
Well, first, Bob, thanks for having me on your show.
Oh,
it's a pleasure.
I'll just swan.
Nice one.
But you can't do this.
What the hell?
Funny you should ask, Bob. I became close friends with the littles. Can you? I'm sorry.
Why did you get so close?
I can't. I'm gonna laugh. It's so hard not to laugh. Wow, that's really
I love math.
I just love it. It's just so nice.
oh
I just
my God.
love mathematics.
Math is my
I
favorite.
just love it.
Amanda is recording us right now.
math.
Dang it.